So for those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm Anna Rhymes, and I am the Director of STEM Literacy and Curriculum at the Society for Science. I oversee the Science Students in High Schools program primarily, have been doing so for about 5 years now. And before that was in Washington, D.C. teaching primarily chemistry for 10 years. So was excited about the opportunity to be to join the society and work with curriculum development, as well as a bunch of different teachers and students from across the U.S. And I am joined tonight by my colleague, Raina Van Dyne, who I always say is my partner in crime on the Science Students in High Schools team. Raina, do you want to give an introduction?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Raina Van Dyne. I'm the Associate Specialist on the Science Students in High Schools program. I've been here for about 2.5 years. And before that, I was a middle school librarian in Wisconsin.
And so we are really thrilled to be here with you all tonight. We do manage a primarily digital program. And so whenever we get the opportunity to see you, meet you, engage with you, learn about, how you want to use the resources, how you are using the resources, we really enjoy the opportunity, albeit through Zoom. We're excited that you're here. So thanks for making time for us tonight. We know that you're extremely busy. So here is what we're hoping that you'll take away from this session. And we did read your responses to the registration as well. So we are going to give you an overview of all of our resources to begin with, just to make sure we're all on the same page with what's available. Then we're going to actually show you some of the resources, multiple examples that kind of touch on different points of the curricula. So just giving you some examples to start with, and then we'll let you go and explore and hopefully find something, at least one article or lesson plan that you can integrate as early as, I don't know, tomorrow or next week, whenever you need an addition to your lesson plan. And then we will be posting those to a Google Sheet. Hopefully we'll get a bunch of those on there this year, and we'll host that Google Sheet on our website so that you can go and view by topic based on other teachers' suggestions. And then as time permits too, we'll get you into a breakout room so you can share your resource with some other educators. So, and meet someone from across the country who might be in a similar or different situation than you. So that's kind of where we're headed today.
All right, so this is going to be an interactive workshop today, and we're going to start off with a little observation exercise inspired by one of our journalism articles. So Anna's going to pull that up now, and please just put in the Zoom chat, what are your observations? It's a volcano reacting. What do you observe that it's reacting to? Anything going on?
Surface.
Yes, nice. Water level changing.
Yep.
Water level lowering. Yep, exactly.
Nice. Okay, so just showing you a little example here. I'm going to zoom out actually on this so that you see this is actually a GIF in one of our articles, in one of our Science News articles. And this comes from Greece's Santorini volcano erupts more often when sea level drops. So certainly you all were noticing some of those aspects within the GIF that was obviously in the article. And this article is written by Maria Temming, and actually was one of the first ones. It was the first one that we covered with our educator guides. So we'll make those connections in just a bit as well. I'm going to pop back over here to the PowerPoint, and I pulled a little bit of text from Maria's article here just to highlight a couple things about our journalism. So the first sentence there, you can see that Maria is trying to hook you with her little whimsical sentence about the volcano getting ready to rumble. And then I've pulled a subsequent paragraph, and it is showing you that it's naming the scientific investigation essentially that the article is covering. And then you'll also notice that Maria has interviewed the study's co-author and has put the quote in this paragraph. And that's that all of those items essentially within that paragraph are just trying to show you that this is in fact trustworthy, reliable science journalism. So just giving you an idea of what we're doing. We're covering primary research articles. And our journalists are in fact, and you'll hear Raina talk a little bit more about this, but they're experts in their fields that they're covering as well. So it's the latest scientific research that's really condensed down into a more readable, compact version of a primary research article. And so a couple quick aspects when we're going through and trying to figure out, we create lesson plans, and we'll get into all of that from some of these articles. For this one in particular, obviously that GIF, that nice little volcano GIF caught my eye in terms of covering it, but also the content of the article, it really gives this perfect example of how a computer simulation can answer a scientific question. And so definitely a big part, a big emphasis in many standards, including the next generation science standards. And so what a great way to engage students with computer simulation. All right, moving along.
All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about our science journalism. Science News and Science News for Students are the Society's two award-winning journalism publications that cover the breadth of science. And science journalists on both teams are experts in their fields, and they really cover a comprehensive overview of the latest scientific research. Articles are packed with literary devices, which make them fun to read and easy to understand, and also really great literacy-based learning tools. Articles in Science News for Students can be found at sciencenewsforstudents.org and generally have readability scores around middle school grades. They also have additional educational content like power words or vocabulary words at the end of every article. And then Science News is written for the general public, but has readability scores around high school grades. And those articles can be found in the print magazine and then also at sciencenews.org. Articles in both publications also have citations at the bottom of the page, which often link to primary source articles that are open source. So this is a great way to get your students reading the primary research articles.
All right, so we are interested to know, just to start, are you currently using any sort of science or STEM journalism in your classroom? And if so, what publications do you use? So go ahead and just populate the Zoom chat. If not, if you don't, no worries. Hopefully we'll get you to find a resource today in our archive, but just curious to know what you're already doing. Oh, and I was going to do a little, oh no, I wasn't. I forgot my Jeopardy earlier, so we'll do that now.
Science News, good to see.
Science News, of course.
Good, we already have people familiar, so that's nice. Discovery Education.
Well.
Good.
Good.
None yet, Katie, that's fine. Hopefully you'll start after this presentation. We'll convince you.
Yeah. Find a resource. Okay. Another magazine from University, West Virginia University. Nice. Okay. So let's go ahead and dive into a little bit more about our program goals and then just the program resources kind of as a whole. So we're talking about specific resources that you can find and use, and then we will also give you kind of just the overview of what you have available to you this year through the program. So first off, just
I'll fill in for her. I think she might have dropped. Anyway, yeah, the program goal is to really boost STEM literacy for every high school student using our journalism. So helping students to tie what they're learning in their science class to the latest scientific research. One moment, let me share. And a little bit about our program resources. So every school gets 10 print copies of each issue of Science News during the program year, which is August to May. You also get year-round access to the Science News archive. That's both sciencenews.org and sciencenewsforstudents.org. And the Science News archive dates back to 1921, so that's pretty cool. We also have an Edmodo group with educators where you can ask us questions and each other questions and share how you're using the resources. We also send out weekly programmatic newsletters on Friday mornings that link to our latest educational content, as well as other opportunities from the Society for Science. We also have a digital educator guide library that is full of interdisciplinary lesson plans, each one of which is inspired by a Science News article and links to that article. And then finally, we have these webinar workshops throughout the program year where we share the best ways to use our resources, ideas that we have, and then you can also collaborate with other teachers who are using the resources as well. All right, move on. So yeah, did you know that we have these digital educator guides? Each one is paired to a Science News article, and they include these 3 different exercises. So reading comprehension questions, which are really just very paired to the article. Our journalists actually write the questions, so they're very familiar with the content of the article. And then we have discussion prompts, which are cross-curricular, and we just have students really dive into the concepts from the article. And then the activities can be hands-on experiments. We've done debates, a lot of diagramming and modeling activities. So that's just a really great way for students to dive more into the concepts around the article.
And Raina, I joined back now. I'm
wonderful.
Sorry. Of course, it just dropped. I just dropped, of course.
You can take over this slide.
Okay, yeah, I think you pretty much covered. Now I'm looking at 2 different screens, of course. Pretty much covered just the different types of educator guides. So as Raina was mentioning, and we'll show you a bunch of examples, we take a deep dive into one of the articles. That's usually from the most recent issue as well. So, and we're constantly highlighting those to you because it's the latest research that's coming out.
All right. So here are some examples of how we know that teachers are using Science News in high schools resources. And we're gonna bring you to the website and really show you how to access our lesson plans and really get you into there. So I'm gonna stop sharing, and Anna, do you wanna share the website?
Yep, I will do that. Got it. All right.
Okay, so one of the ways that we access that is through our programmatic newsletter that I mentioned we send out on Friday mornings. And to access the latest guide, you just have to click that orange View Guide button, and that will take you directly to the guide page. And on this page, you can see the title of the guide and a little about the guide section that tells you what's in the guide. You can also download it with that button right there. And then if you scroll down further, you can see what the guide includes. So this has a comprehension question section and a discussion prompt section. You can also access the Science News and Science News for Students articles in that paired articles block. Also, an exciting development this year is we're starting to have Spanish translations of the Science News for Students articles. So those will be in the same paired articles block there. So let's click on the comprehension section and you can see what one of those looks like. So here is a comprehension question section. You can see it is a comprehension section at the top there. You can see the name of it, and then there's that link back to the full guide if you want to go back there. You also have the option to download the student worksheet, which includes all of the questions without the answers. So you can print this and hand it out or post it to your online learning management system. You also have that same paired articles block where the Spanish article will be as well, and the standards alignment. So that tells you what NGSS DCIs are aligned to the activity. for comprehension section. So yeah, and then on the body of the page there, those are all the questions with the answers. And then if we go back to the guide, you can see the discussion section, which, as Anna mentioned when we looked at that GIF, this discussion section really goes into how a computer simulation can be used to answer a scientific question.
All right, so we're going to take you to another way of finding resources in either lesson plan archives or in both of the article archives as well. And that's just through the search page. So if you are thinking about a particular topic that you're looking for resources on or for, then you can certainly just type it in here. And so if I were thinking about starting out the year and teaching chemical bonding again, I might just type on it, chemical bonds, and hit submit and see what I get. Before we go into, so what you're viewing down here are the lesson plans, which we know are all also paired to a Science News and generally a Science News student's version of the article. You can also do the searches on the archives of Science News and Science News for Students directly from this search page. So it's really a great place for you as educators to go to do your searches because, for example, we can open up in a new link here or a new tab, the search for chemical bonds on Science News. And so if I go to that tab, you're seeing all of the article results for that particular keywords or those keywords here, okay? And then, open that for me. And then you can do the exact same thing on Science News for Students. So open a link in a new tab and I'll show you what the Science News for Students website looks like. And you'll see that at the top, they're actually denoted, the websites are denoted with different colors. So Science News for Students will always be green. Science News in High Schools, Lesson Plan, Educator Resources will be orange, and Science News will be blue. So you'll know which website you're sitting on. So just showing you that quick tip of searching all three, basically all three websites off of our one page here too. So just thinking about kind of the beginning of the year type of lessons and activities that might be of interest to you right now. I've pulled a couple out just to highlight. I'm going to start with the physical science, more chemistry, physics aligned exercises and activities. Just give you a few examples. And then again, at the end of this, we're going to encourage you to go off and do some searching and find one. The other thing I was going to do is answer the question real quickly about the middle school grade level. And that is, so our journalism is accessible really to many students of all middle school and high school grades. The Science News for Students journalism is focused just on the reading level of 5th through 9th grade. And so if you're looking specifically for that reading level, the Science News for Students versions of the articles and that website is where you want to go first. Okay, so just starting off here, chemical bonding. I'm going to click on our first comprehension section here, bonds in limbo, and show you that we did have a guide last year that we created. I'm going to click on this Science News article because it's pretty interesting. I got very excited when this article came out because, of course, it is an exception to the bonding rule. So the scientists here found out that there's a chemical bond that is a little bit stronger than a hydrogen bond and not as strong as a covalent bond. And they gave a lot of information about those types of bonds in terms of their normal classification, and then talked about why that particular bond is different. And so saw that as a great opportunity to highlight in the comprehension section. You'll see that we're literally asking questions about those types of bonds, the classic examples of those types of bonds, for example. Directly coming from that Science News article. So just saying that the science concepts that you're already teaching are highlighted in these articles, which is pretty neat. Going back to the guide and looking at the discussion section, you're going to see that this was also an opportunity to have students think about accepting the exceptions but kind of why do exceptions exist? And in particular here, we focused on chemistry. Why do we have exceptions? First of all, what are the classical definitions? Why do we have modifications to those? And then why do we even create the rules if we don't always follow them? But I remember teaching, we would always run across that exception to the rule and the students would be oh so upset about it. But the reason, right, the rules exist is to have a baseline knowledge and then understand that there aren't really any rules and that we've got to look at each case individually. So kind of just thinking about having students discuss that with one another and address that, because it always during the year. So that's just a quick example of really a physical science chemistry related example. Also kind of chemistry, but also physics related is this great article that came out in 2019 when it was the 150th anniversary of our periodic table. And this article really went through all of the history of the periodic table and then how the periodic table is set up and the history of that as well. So what a great way to introduce it to students. It's really a lovely written article and gives a lot of background and information about the key players as well. And you can see some of the first types of tables that were organized in different ways. Obviously, we saw this as a great opportunity to create an educator guide that was related to this content. And so you'll see we've got a whole comprehension section, again, highlighting the aspects of the article itself. Then we saw the opportunity to say, hey, wait, this table is a model, and let's talk more broadly about models in science and why they're important. And this then uses the periodic table, defines the model of that table, but then allows students to think more cross-curricularly about general models in science and to pull in, right? So if you're not teaching chemistry, to pull in other examples from bio, from enviroscience, physics, et cetera, right? Genetics, thinking about models in genetics, certainly. So giving you ideas again with the answers there and posing the question to students, obviously modifying as you need for your own classroom because it's always unique, but kind of a fun opportunity there. So then going back to the guide, just highlighting a couple of the quick activities at the bottom too that were kind of fun. Now trending on the periodic table. Don't know if you all have heard that song that so lovely displays how the table is set up, but that's kind of a fun little activity on that, more of an intro. And then we do have one that's paired to more of a physics component of the nuclear view of the atom. So thinking about the interactions among the protons and neutrons and the stability of chemical elements. So that one is a little higher level and certainly might not be right at the beginning of the year unless it's an upper level class. So then popping along here to another example, last year we had the physics of alien rain and looking at raindrops on different planets can be composed of different molecules. So methane on Saturn's moon or iron on this exoplanet WASP 76b, which is what we were focused on. And really interesting article, right, about weather patterns on different planets that specifically names molecules and elements that then could allow students to think about why it is raining, why it is precipitating these different types of molecules on different planets and the conditions that those planets must be under in order for that precipitation to occur. And so that's really where we went with the guide on this one. We saw that as an opportunity to model atoms and molecules and think about the conditions of the planets based on the phase change diagrams of those particular molecules or elements. And then obviously the comprehension section there as well. Moving more along to physics and an engineering example. This one is such a neat little, organism. This is the diabolical ironclad beetle who can survive getting run over by a car. And this study actually looked at the organism's exoskeleton. And so figured out why, in fact, it was so strong, was this interlocking feature that it had in its exoskeleton. And so our guide is essentially looking at the biomimicry of that, right? How could we take the physics from that particular exoskeleton and have students build a better box, right? A box that can withstand forces, essentially. And so we're looking at compressive forces. We're asking students to draw force diagrams in this, and we're getting all while getting the inspiration from that beetle. So kind of going back to that article, having those physics principles explained in that article, and then bringing that through to an engineering type design activity here. The reason we went with boxes here was because this was also during hybrid teaching and some virtual teaching. And so the list of resources, this is an example of an activity where we actually list resources and give background to you as teachers, so forth and so on. And we wanted to make the material super simple to find and have at home. So that's why we went with box designing on this one in particular. Moving along to more bio and viro, ecology type examples. This article came out in 2019. Yep, 2019, double checking myself there, about the disappearing sea ice and disrupting Arctic food web. And so does a great job of explaining where the data is coming from. That is explaining why we know the sea ice is actually melting, and to the extent at which it's melting, and obviously showing you where it's located, but also going through just how this is then impacting the ecosystem that exists there, and gives examples of organisms within the ecosystem and how those organisms are impacted. So it gives a lot of great information there. And I'm showing you the Science News for Students version of that. And so you're seeing then at the end of that article, there are in fact power words, which are just defined glossary of terms. So our guide on that, our activity was Web of Changes, where we highlighted all sorts of the different organisms within the ecosystem, and actually have students going and finding examples from the article to populate, obviously, all of these roles. And then once kind of using the article as an example, and going through all of that and learning from it, we're asking students to go and think about their local ecosystem and actually populating then an example with one from an ecosystem that is more familiar to them. Maybe they don't live up there and don't know the Arctic well. So what is more familiar? So that was an example there. And then last example, I'll just chat through briefly. I know I've been chatting for a bit, but this one is very cool. Even this image is pretty cool. So this is actually a tongue cell, and these are all of the different bacterial communities that are living on and in relationships with other bacterial communities on one tongue cell. So kind of an interesting, also just example of an image that we have in the archive, certainly one that students could even just look at and again, observe as a warm-up if you wanted. But it's really interesting article on a study that was done. And for our discussion of this guide, we were looking at the interspecific interactions, naming them, having students actually define those interactions, think about, again, relating that to the article and the microorganisms that are being defined there in the article. And then our kind of fun twist on this is doing a partner discussion and thinking about a community of actual people and coming up with examples kind of as metaphors for these interactions. So Raina and I actually did a couple with our own work people as well. It's kind of fun if you want to do a little metaphorical example for yourself. So I think that is it, Raina. I'm going to hand it back over to you.
All right, thank you. Hopefully some of those examples struck a chord with you. And now we're going to have you search for your own examples. So before we do that, this is the website that we want educators to be searching from, because you are able to search all three of our archives. So our lesson plan archives, our science news archive, and our science news for students archive can all be searched on this page. And then you should send your students either to the science news site or the science news for students site, depending on their reading level. So you can see on this page, there are a few different ways you can filter your search. So you can filter it based on topic, on exercise type, the date range it was published, or the NGSS code that it aligns with. And then linking back to the slide where we showed the different ways teachers are using our resources, we've tried to group our resources into collections that correspond to some of those goals. So data analysis, research and design, literacy practices. We also have one on coronavirus and one on diversity in STEM. And from the survey, a few of you mentioned that you'd want to learn about how our resources can be used for your literacy goals. So we can look at our literacy practices collection as an example. We have a lot of literacy resources. We have some writing activities, some that go into metaphors used in the science news articles. One of our most popular literacy exercises is Dissect a Scientific Argument. That is a claim evidence reasoning activity. So we can click on that and look at that quickly. So yeah, this just follows the CER model. It defines what a claim is and asks the student to look at the article and say what the claim evidence reasoning of the article is, and then evaluate how good that is. So this is an example if, in case you're doing any CER in your classroom.
Okay, awesome. So so the question about the dissecting a scientific argument, CER, and then a resource link going up in the chat now as well. So resource overview link. We saw that I'm sharing the bio, little resource by topic, Google, part of the Google sheet here, and saw that you guys had some of you had some success with finding a resource, hopefully, that you can, implement in class. Does anyone have a resource that you found that was particularly interesting that you'd like to share out with the bigger group? We're a little smaller than anticipated. Was there anything that struck a chord with you in particular? Anyone want to share? Okay, if not.
I'll share if you like.
Awesome, yeah, thank you.
Okay. My name's Diana. I teach in New York City, 9th grade, living environment and environmental science. And the resource I chose was in the biology section under ecology. I took that Here Comes the Bigger Mammal and the Do Not Disturb. And I was talking with Leslie in our little breakout room about how it discusses just how life, it discusses abiotic and biotic factors in an interesting way. And my students are coming to me with 7th grade life science, then 8th grade earth science. And I was just like, wow, talking about asteroids and how that impacted like the abiotic factors. I thought it was just a different way of doing abiotic and biotic factors. Like most of us teachers compile a list of items and be like, okay, kids, is it living or non-living? And I think this was just a more meaningful way and connecting it maybe back to their prior year's experience. So I thought that was really cool.
Awesome, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, absolutely. A very interesting article too. Sometimes you get prompted by that stuff, but yeah, definitely an interesting article.
I found one for chemistry.
Yeah.
It was beets bleed red, but chemists turn them blue. That was fun. I mean, you could incorporate that in other classes besides chemistry. That's fun.
Pull that one up and show. So this is the, yep, the student sheet on that one. Very neat. Thanks for sharing, Denise. Anyone else find one? saw some additional ones on bio, but certainly we can all view them. And so what we'll do is we'll take this Google Sheet and we'll post it on the website and probably even send it out. We might populate it with a few additional resources here and there. That is, there was a question about kind of district cohorts versus individual schools and individual teachers joining. It is something that we have done for districts, is basically take full-on curricula and populate the different units with our own, links to resources. And so if that's something that, as a district coordinator, if anyone is in attendance who's a coordinator, that's something that we're offering to the coordinators who sign up their districts. The program too, we kind of gloss over it a little bit when we talk about it, but the program is sponsored by both individual and institutional sponsors. And so in order to create the resources, create our journalism, and to get the hard copy magazines out to everyone, you are supported by funders. And so that is a part of the program. We have 5,000, about 5,500 schools right now enrolled and who are receiving funding for the resources. And so that's a reason why to sign up through or as a district, so that everybody in your district, all of the educators, in particular the STEM educators, have access to all the resources. So just wanted to highlight a couple of those things. Does anybody else have any sort of questions? We're basically at the end of what we were going to say in terms of the resources, tell you all about the resources today. Do any of you have particular resources you're looking for, or questions about location of resources, content in them? There are many other aspects that are within our journalism archives, for example, that we could tell you about. Obviously, you can explore those as well.
I think that
Anna?
go ahead.
Okay, Anna, number one, I want you to keep sending us those emails with those different topics and things like that we can link to. And number two, well, I don't have a lot of time because I'm now forced to teach an extra class because we had a chemistry teacher just quit. So I have to teach chemistry class besides the forensics and the biology. The other one is I want to get some of the other teachers, and we have a new STEM class. Can you give me the directions on how I can link them into all this too?
Yes, Marina's already
They would
finding
like access to
link.
this, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have, and that is our culminating slide here, is the link to the digital access form for all of the educators. So you can send that to them. School is already enrolled in the program, and so everybody has access to the resources. And in order to send them those newsletters with that link out to the specific examples in the search pages, then yes, they need to be in. We've got to know who they are, and try to encourage them to do that. Obviously, as a former educator, the word of mouth is really kind of paramount in terms of picking up a new resource and spending a little extra time to find something that inspires you and inspires your students. And so I also encourage you just to, pitch it at a department meeting to your colleagues and say, hey, I found this particular article and my students reacted in this particular way to it, as just a source of kind of that inspiration, because I know it's hard. You guys have no time. There's no extra time. And so sometimes to do a little extra searching and whatnot is a lot to ask. But again, the reward of that, I feel like is always, not always, but most of the time, and hopefully with our resources, worth it. So yeah, just a little promotion from you as a colleague, I think would be important as well. And Raina has dropped that link to the form in there. Any other questions? I know there was someone else who was also speaking up.
It was me. I know as we, of course, I'm always science fair focused. And so, a lot of times I'm looking for research or information more about the data manipulation and how students, interpret the data. Do you have specific resources for that?
Yes, we do. So if you go back to, and Raina's going to drop it maybe in there, and then Michelle put something else in there, but let me show you where that is. So let's spell it correctly. So if we go back to the search page, because I'm not spelling that. Let me just.
So I had found one. That was the one I had found. My name is Leslie. I found one where it was the bias in science research. And that was the one I discussed actually with Diana, because that's what we're focusing on too, is fact checking fact checkers, and you know, how to not do standard old crap tests, what they teach them in English, but actually investigating that. So I'm trying to find it now. Potential how bias affects scientific research.
Yes, that is a great example. The data analysis section, that category on the search page too, is also a good place to go. We've done quite a few on that, and Leslie, you were just talking about, the one you were just talking about is within here as well. But there are, so visual models for how a virus spreads. We do obviously had a lot of good data to work with. Science News has and had a lot of data, good data to work with the coronavirus. But there's certainly a lot of data specific exercises here, kind of in a myriad of ways. Just pop into one. This is the global inequity. Leslie, was this the one you were referring to? The inequity of the vaccination? No. And Leslie, you're muted, sorry.
I know, I did look at that one, but this one was specifically how bias affects scientific research, just to start them thinking. It was kind of cool. It showed even just looking at a photograph and how your bias changes your observation. And so that's a really good beginning for observing in a lesson, observing that in a lab. So that's how I got started as beginning sort of activities.
Yeah, that's a really good one as well. Ironically, we were just having a brainstorming meeting about an upcoming guide and an activity that will come out later on this year. And we're going to link it to human evolution. And throughout that article, it actually constantly probes the reader to say, how do you think the scientists who actually were making these decisions about human evolution along the way, how did their background and life experiences impact kind of the reasoning that they were using to support the evidence, right? Or how did that impact it? So the other related, just trying to brainstorm. We do have a couple other related activities also in the diversity in STEM on specific bias examples. So Science News article, Science News for Students article, just that link back to particular articles that relate to like at the NIH, and I think it was 2008, 9, actually named that sex had to be a biological variable in any study that was receiving funding from them. So interesting, kind of an interesting article there, and just how scientists need to think about that impact.
We also have a guide called Just to Facts, which I'll put in the chat, which is about how to evaluate how trustworthy news resources. Yeah, so that's an important one for everyone, but also for students.
All right, any final questions here? Thoughts? We'll wrap up and give you the rest of your night. Back to you. Okay, well, we do really thank you for taking some time out of your day. We know that you, again, have very little of it. So thank you so much for spending some with us. And we hope if you do have any sort of questions that come up in the future, you can always get in touch with us at SNHS@societyforscience.org. It will always be linked. You can always respond to an email. You can just reply to the email that comes in on Friday. and we'll get back to you. We look forward to seeing you this year, and please let us know how things are going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.